letters to start with. So I'm very pleased to welcome Alan Murad, Campaign Director for Getting Britain Out of Europe. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm honoured to address such a distinguished audience. There can be no more important topic to discuss today than the topic of Britain's democracy. I want to begin by saying in no uncertain terms, there is a crisis in Britain today, a crisis of self-government. It means we can elect members of parliament to sit in Westminster, but whichever party gets in power, their hands are tied by a labyrinth of laws which few British citizens have ever heard of. The reason Britain cannot govern itself is because our membership of the EU has hollowed out what remains of Britain's sovereignty. Hardly anyone disagrees. Britain's democracy is not what it used to be, with pathetic turnouts at elections and widespread disenchantment with politics. The antipathy towards politicians grew since the expenses scandal to a fever pitch. Opinions vary on what exactly is wrong with British democracy. A lot of people point the finger at Westminster, and they are not entirely wrong. After all, most of the politicians sitting in Westminster have allowed power to pass from our own parliament to the European Union, and most of them still consent to the current arrangement. But the problem is not only the complicity of Westminster. The root of the problem is the EU establishment. The Commission, the Council of Ministers, the European Parliament, all of them assume they have a mandate to rule Europe. It means they feel they can overrule democracy if they want to. A good example of this is the Lisbon Treaty, which was rejected in the referendum by Ireland in 2008. This was intolerable to Brussels, so they forced Ireland to rethink and decide again. Second time, the EU got the outcome they wanted and patted themselves on the back for getting the treaty ratified by all the member states. We are taught and educated to understand that no means no. We believe that democracies are created by the decisions of the people, yet what we get in the European Union is doublespeak. No means yes. Yes can mean no. The EU allows countries to hold fake referendums where there's only one right answer. If you get it wrong, you have to try again, like resitting an exam. This is an institution which claims to champion democracy and liberal values. But the closer you look, the more you dig, it becomes apparent the EU is merely a champion of hypocrisy. They set a brilliant example for autocratic regimes around the world. You can get away with anything as long as you declare you are committed to human rights and a host of other buzzwords. But Brussels doesn't like being criticized. Those who do are now labeled as populists and nationalists. They can smear Eurosceptics and get away with it, and any opposition is met with outcry, even censorship. It is putting it lightly to say the EU wields a great deal of influence over how the country is run. The majority of our laws do originate in Brussels, but increasingly our trade, foreign policy, defence policy, environment policy, energy policy, justice and crime affairs, you name it, it has been handed over to the EU bureaucrats enacting laws in our behalf. Over 80% of the laws enforced by the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs are EU regulations. These departments, like DEFRA, have no real role in shaping domestic policy anymore or advising the government. They just implement laws made elsewhere by people who are completely unknown to the British public. It begs the question, if vast swathes of our policy making gets handed over to a proxy parliament and an unelected proxy government, what is the point of Westminster? What do taxpayers pay for? For Westminster to operate as a glorified local council. Britain, which is just a region in a larger country, a federal Europe. That is precisely the plan. Mr. Barroso, the former president of the EU, once said we will need to move towards a federation of nation states. That is what we need. This is our political horizon. He has left his office, but his dream of a federation lives on. It is dear to all Europhiles. Their hope is a Europe that is one nation. It is in fact written in the very DNA of the European Union. It is an inevitable manifest destiny. But where is the mandate for it? As we understand it, the British people voted to join the EU to be part of a trading organisation, not a political union.
Yes.
A lot has changed since then, but we should have known better. Ever closer union is written into the preambles of each and every EU treaty, first to last. As far as the EU is concerned, we have accepted ever closer union because it is in the terms and conditions. The EU is not going to press the brakes because David Cameron tells them to do so. Fortunately, Euroscepticism is on the rise all across Europe. Some of you might have heard about the results of Greece's general election last Sunday. A radical far-left party called Syriza swept victory on the platform against EU-imposed austerity. Considering the level of misery the Greek people have suffered, it was no surprise to me that Syriza is now in government. It was a cry for help. The people of Greece, the birthplace of democracy, have lost faith in Europe because they have seen what the EU championing democracy looks like. The advocates of the EU say we risk jobs if we left the EU. The myth of 5 million jobs being at risk, which was refuted by the British government's own report. The big multinational companies often say they will relocate out of Britain, just as they did when we refused to join the euro. What they really mean is those jobs depend on trade with the euro. Trade will not come to a standstill if we left. Article 50 in the Lisbon Treaty demands the EU negotiate a trade agreement with any country which exits the Union. What matters is not whether we are in the EU single market, but whether we have access to the single market. Of course, we will need to negotiate a trade agreement to secure that access, but will the EU refuse to give us a good deal? The doomsayers say we can't stand on our own 2 feet. We'll be locked out of the single market. Brussels will hold all the cards. It is all nonsense. Let's look at the facts. We have a trade deficit of 50 billion with Europe, while we have a trade surplus of 60 billion with the rest of the world. We are one of the EU's biggest customers, but the EU is no longer our biggest customer. We are trading more with Asia and America than ever before. Europe, as Dan Hannan says, is the only continent on the planet which is not growing. By the way, that is counting Antarctica. We can talk about the EU, but the EU advocates will say the membership fee will give the EU a small price to pay for the increased trade and prosperity which results from our EU membership. But what sort of prosperity is Brussels securing for its indebted members like Greece, Spain and Italy? We are paying the EU to impose laws which reduces the competitiveness of our own economy. The truth is, the membership fee is a small part of the picture. Evidence is mounting that our EU membership has hidden costs that go far beyond our membership fee. Just based on the government's own impact assessments, the EU regulations cost the British economy a huge 27.4 billion a year, at least in 2013. Those same impact assessments estimate the British economy benefits by billions of pounds from EU measures, but those estimates are flawed and wildly overstated. For example, the British economy is supposed to have benefited by 20 billion from EU climate change regulations. But that figure is dependent on a global deal to reduce carbon emissions, which was never struck. So we don't benefit from that, we just carry the cost. The Working Time Directive costs the economy 4 billion, there is no known benefit. The Agency Workers Directive even allowed employers to give 0-hour contracts. During the period of the current coalition government alone, businesses were burdened with over 3,000 regulations. The list goes on. Can we achieve reforms? Can we get a better arrangement? The answer to that was delivered to Cameron by the EU's President Jean-Claude Juncker and Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. While they will allow some restraints on EU migrants claiming benefits, like child benefit being sent to their children living abroad, the principle of free movement is not up for negotiation. It is a pillar of the EU and a red line as far as the EU grandees are concerned. So Cameron would believe the British public are a pack of fools and will believe him when he says he can control EU migration. That is not possible. We've heard it from the horse's mouth. Free movement was always the prime objective of the EU. The EU is in some ways an attempt to repeat how the United States established itself as a single federal nation out of 13 separate and newly independent states. In fact, the US Constitution provides the right to freedom of movement as well, for all citizens except for certain categories like criminals. The EU is a package deal, not an a la carte menu to pick and choose from. In some ways, Syriza belongs to the school of thought. They want Greece's debt to be forgiven, even though other countries which got bailed out by Germany have accepted austerity and reformed their public spending. Just like Cameron, the leader of Syriza, Exodus Tsipras, is deluding himself. If Greece gets its debts written off, every other country which received bailouts will ask for the same deal. He wants what he can't have, a tailor-made arrangement. And it is the same with free movement. There is never going to be a tailor-made arrangement in which Britain maintains control over our borders. Because if we can do it, what will stop any other country wanting the same? The Great British public must be wary of this. The message is clear. The EU is a package deal. There is no renegotiated relationship in the horizon. So we must get out. What happens afterwards? I can assure you the world is full of opportunity for a nation like Britain. The world's leading English-speaking nations are growing at an alarming rate. The Heritage Foundation produced a list, an index of economic freedom. The top 4 freest nations in the world are Commonwealth countries or former British possessions: Hong Kong, Singapore, New Zealand, and Australia. Britain, by virtue of being so different from the rest of the EU, is 13th on the list, ahead of all the other member states, including Germany. I shouldn't have to spell it out to anyone, but Britain's future lies in closer ties with those Commonwealth countries, with whom we share the English language, the common law, and the parliamentary system. India is among the powerhouses of Asia, growing at a pace which makes the EU's eyes bleed, has doubled the population of the EU, and a growing middle class. When we joined the single market, we thought we would be joining a trading relationship, but it is now clear that we joined a federation in the making. One of the most insidious claims Europhiles make is the idea the EU preserves peace in Europe. This is because 2 world wars were followed by a long period of calm. They believe is the result of creating the single market. I would argue it is because there is virtually no chance of another war breaking out in Europe after 1945, that it was possible to establish a single market in the first place. And the idea by joining a federation we will ensure peace in Europe is a pipe dream. Federations have often experienced civil war when individual states which disapprove of certain arrangements attempt to withdraw. This happened in Nigeria. It even happened in the United States, when the southern states decided to break away. It was the bloodiest war the US has ever fought, despite a long history of military involvement abroad. But the establishment will use every tool in the box to win this referendum and frighten the electorate to stick with the status quo. I'll give you another example. The EU calendars will tell you that the second half of 2017, the year when the referendum is supposed to be done, is when Britain will next hold the rotating 6-month presidency of the Council of the European Union. This means in the second half of 2017, the Prime Minister or the Chancellor or the Home Secretary or any of the Cabinet Ministers will be up on the podium and in front of the mics and cameras after every big EU meeting in the second half of 2017. The rotating presidency means it will be Britain's turn on the chair at the meetings of the Council of Ministers. So for 6 months, British ministers will appear alongside Martin Schulz and Jean-Claude Juncker. For 6 months, the Prime Minister and the senior cabinet ministers will be able to pose as if they were at the heart of Europe, that meaningless race, and are influencing events leading the EU exactly at the time the referendum campaign will be underway. More, Cameron will be able to convene EU meetings in Britain, not in Brussels. The 6 months will be one photo opportunity after another, of Britain posing as the leader of the EU elite who have been summoned to the United Kingdom. But it will just be a pantomime, meant to deceive the British people who don't know how the EU works. Why should they? They have better things to do. Cameron will confuse the British people over the powers of the President of the European Council and non-existent powers of the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. And the pantomime will be played out during the referendum campaign. But when that referendum comes around, we would arrive at a crossroads. If we remain, we face being trapped in the EU, possibly for an entire generation. We will face being trapped in an EU that will inevitably welcome a country like Turkey to its warm embrace. When that happens, the EU will be dominated by Turkey. The country will be the most populous country in the EU. So Turkey will have more members of the European Parliament than any other member state, including Germany, which currently has the highest number of members of Parliament, the European Parliament. The country is the second biggest army in NATO. Even now, it is the sixth biggest economy in Europe. They are a regional superpower. There is no doubt Turkey will wield incredible influence in Brussels when they join. As for free movement, it is worth looking at Turkey's neighbours, the poorest order with Syria. If we don't get Britain out, That is what we'll be facing. Open borders with Turkey, an EU in which Britain wields less and less influence. Once the British public votes in the referendum and the right decision is made, we need only to repeal the 1972 European Communities Act and negotiate a free trade agreement. We are Europe's biggest market. They sell more to us than we do to it. We will still keep selling German car components so they can sell us cars. Switzerland and Norway both sell more to the EU per capita than we do. America, with no MEPs, no commissioners, and no representation in the Council of Ministers, America has its own trade deal with the EU. As for countries outside the EU, a small one like Iceland can negotiate a free trade agreement with China. Switzerland has even more free trade agreements than the EU. We can reclaim our seat in the World Trade Organization, where we can have a say on international standards. The EU is, after all, a retailer and not a manufacturer of the laws it pumps out. But even the EU can sit on the international bodies higher up the food chain than the EU, which set the standards that the EU adopts. My conclusion is this, that we are engaged in a mighty constitutional struggle, the most important in recent history. Not enough of our fellow citizens know how much of our government has passed on to Brussels. How difficult it is now to have a proper democratic government of Britain which listens to the wishes of its people. Our Eurosceptic movement is to win the referendum and get Britain out. We must be prepared. We must campaign with a positive message, not a nostalgic one, but a vision of Britain that is a global player, free and independent. Thank you very much.